Welcome to SIMCAST, a podcast brought to you by the Society for Imaging Informatics in Medicine.
Greetings, SIMCAST listeners. Today, I've had the pleasure of sitting down with Cheryl Kreider Carey, the CEO of SIIM, as well as Nabil Safdar, the incoming SIIM Board Chair. And to introduce both, as I mentioned, Cheryl Kreider Carey is the CEO of SIIM. She has a passion for developing high-functioning teams from both a governance and operations point of view, with 30 years experience as an association executive. She has been working as the CEO of SIIM for the past 6 years. In those 6 years, they've navigated a number of challenges such as the pandemic, acquiring another business, and of course, executing a massive digital transformation. SIIM is actually doubled in size under Cheryl's leadership, and it shows as far as results, growth, and success. Nabil Safdar is the Vice Chair of Imaging Informatics at the Department of Radiology and Imaging Sciences at the Emory University School of Medicine and is an Associate Chief Healthcare Information Officer for Emory Healthcare. As I mentioned, he is the Chair-elect of the SIIM Board. Nabil works closely with a group of physicians, physicists, clinical informaticists, and researchers who are actively bringing innovative solutions to advance clinical, education, and research missions of Emory Healthcare. Dr. Safdar has led a 1-year Imaging Informatics Fellowship for physicians interested in developing their interest and skills in imaging informatics, and is an Associate PD for Emory's new Clinical Informatics Fellowship. Nabil has earned his medical degree from Thomas Jefferson University and his master's in public health from the University of Maryland. He completed his radiology residency and fellowship in imaging informatics and musculoskeletal imaging at the University of Maryland. Dr. Safdar is board certified by the American Board of Radiology with a certificate of added qualification in pediatric radiology. He is also board certified in clinical informatics by the American Board of Preventative Medicine. I hope you enjoy this chat we had with both Cheryl and Nabil as much as I did. Thank you. Glad to have you with us today, Cheryl and Nabil. Thank you again for your time. I recognize you're both very busy people, but been very generous in the past with your time and this time around as well. Maybe I'll start with Nabil with a question of, what's your experience like ramping up for your role? You're obviously taking the reins July 1st of this year. You've been kind of shadowing Tessa for the past year. What's this been like so far?
Mohammed, that's a great question. SIIM does an amazing job of developing people in their career and in their volunteerism to SIIM. It's one of the organizations which invites many committee chairs and volunteers to board meetings so that there is a slow learning process over years. In some cases, for me, it's certainly been years where you've been learning what are the major initiatives, what's the mission and the vision, what are the ways that we look at budget, what are the programs, what are the major concerns, who are the movers and the shakers. So this last year for me has felt like a very natural progression to that, which I really appreciate. There's nothing more horrible than landing into a position and feeling like you're unprepared. But, through all of that, kind of a years long process, not just 1 year, I'd say, I feel like I've been given the tools that I need. I really enjoyed in January, Cheryl and I went to the ASAE conference. There was great learning and teaching about managing nonprofits and strategic planning and all that. But more importantly, we were able to spend time together and get to know more about how we work. And then earlier this year, we started thinking about, as a group, not just me, about what are some of the major drivers of change, not just for SIIM, but for all nonprofits and all of our societies. Things like, how are we dealing with algorithms and algorithmic justice and rights, remote work. It was interesting. Fraying cybersecurity was a topic we talked about, and then we had a national major event around that. There are many ongoing events, and healthcare disruption as well. So, I feel like it's been great to be able to get to know the organization, but flex some thinking muscle about what's going on in the world. This is a horrible analogy, but it's like pre-training a large language model in your brain about what's the background. You're going to have to start answering questions and generating content and, strategizing and thinking. But to do that from a blank slate is very difficult. It depends a lot on how you've been pre-trained. And that's what SIM is all about. It's about belonging. It's about education. And I feel like that's why I'm so psyched to be in this position, because I've been pre-trained, I'd say relatively well over time.
And Mohana, can I just say how grateful I am to Nabil, Tessa, Mark, those who have come before, as I watch them on board and know that they're going to give 1 year as chair-elect, 2 as chair, 1 as immediate past chair. That's 4 years of volunteer time. I can't do my job without them. I very much value that as they come on as my co-pilot, is what I like to call it. And so, Nabil, thank you. I look forward to working with you.
It's awesome. I love how you two are using the buzzwords in the industry. So Cheryl, you said co-pilot. Nabil gave us the analogy of a large language model. We're going to have a question about that in just a moment. But before I do, Cheryl, I actually had a question for you. So we talked to Nabil about what it's been like, retrospectively for the past year or so. In your case, I know you and the staff at SIIM headquarters have been very busy doing massive amounts of work. It's been called the digital transformation. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about that for the ones who are uninitiated?
Mohana, the key word there is massive. Massive resources, both financial and human. And so wanting to give a shout out to the board for making that investment financially in our digital transformation, quickly followed by a shout out to the staff for executing this 2+ year project that began in mid-2021 when we retained Ellipsis Partners as the gurus in IT. They helped us form the roadmap through surveys and focus groups in terms of what SIIM members needed in technology. They were the ones that identified the personas at SIIM. They then helped us with the RFP for the AMS, the database, for the consultant to help us with the new website. They were just instrumental in helping us from day one to when we went live, September of last year. And again, the staff throughout that whole process, adding this project on top of everything else that we do year in and year out was not easy. And yet they stayed with it. And I'm just so excited now for our members to have this new website. We call it kind of a curiosity portal. Come explore, so much easier to navigate and have all that you need in one place called My SIIM account. And I want to give a call to action for members to go into My SIIM account, set it up. You can find your CEs there, the information for registration, for the various programs, everything you need, and all in one place. We're just so excited. You can even donate to the SIIM Fund in the My SIIM account and hopefully have a better experience navigating all that SIIM has to offer.
That's great. And I should just point out, because it just dawned on me, the three of us serve on the philanthropy committee. So it's not that you could donate to the SIIM Fund, it's that you should donate to the SIIM Fund. Please and thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Good point.
And I will point out that SIIM offers multiple opportunities for donations. You can donate as part of your registration for the annual meeting. You could do a one-time donation. And of course, you could do a monthly donation. Any amount is highly appreciated, and it goes into supporting SIIM's educational endeavors. You can go find the SIIM donation page to find out more information about what your donation would be going towards. And I promise you, it's really, really cool. I do want to shift the conversation because you two immediately reined in with these AI metaphors. And this is a question to both of you. What do you feel is SIIM's role right now in this context of the generative AI hype?
Yeah, Mohammed, that's a great question. You know, we have to remind, first of all, ourselves that generative AI is only the most recent innovation in a long string of innovations in the AI space, or in the enterprise imaging space for that matter, or the healthcare technology space in general. And there will be others. Every time there seems to be like a major, paradigm shift, we think, oh my God, this is going to revolutionize things for the next 50 years. And that may be true, but then sometime forward, there's another major paradigm shift. Generative AI, first of all, I'll say, whether it's generative AI or enterprise imaging or any of these, major focuses for SIIM over the last 5 to 10 years, I hope that SIIM will continue to be the go-to place for people in the industry to learn as much about these technologies and methods as they'd like to. I've been telling folks, where I work and people that I know in general, if you really want to understand generative AI, we've got the best speakers, even if they're not in imaging. In fact, sometimes if they're not from an imaging background, whether it's, cardiology or path or optho or derm, radiology, it's even better for them to come to SIIM to learn about generative AI because you'll get a true deep understanding of the underlying methodology and how it's different from, for example, convolutional neural networks. But then you'll see the real world applications in which it's being applied in spaces that you're not, typically exposed to. So I think SIIM's role is the same as it's always been. There's a new way of doing things, a new technology. We make it accessible to those who want to learn about that technology. We're going to remain practical about how this really impacts patients, how it really impacts physicians, nurses, those in IT, those in the industry. And then we're going to keep the big picture, real. We're going to realize that there's going to be something else. And by the way, none of this works without the basics of standards, interoperability, budgeting and change management, which are kind of perennial background topics. So if someone wants to learn about generative AI in an ivory tower setting that's not connected to the real world, then SIIM's not their place. But if they want to learn about it in a way that's connected to how it's going to impact healthcare, then SIIM should be at the top of the list.
Excellent. Thank you. And with that, I wanted to ask both of you once again. We can start with you, Nabil, and then Cheryl, if you could then give us your kind of executive point of view on this one. What do you feel your big outline plans are for your time as chair? And, for you, Cheryl, in the next, couple of years, anything in specific that you want to change, add, remove? And of course, only things you're at liberty to disclose at this point.
Mohammed, great question. First of all, I will say in July, I will be unveiling the first of many changes. First of all, no longer being called the chair of the board, but the chancellor of SIIM. And the king actually is my preferred term for it. And we're going to have multiple radical changes. But in all seriousness, planning for the next few years, where we're going to go, it's a group and a team exercise. And it always has been at SIIM, and we know it's going to continue to be that way. One of the decisions we're going to have to make, and we're thinking about already, is are there any major changes that do we need to make, or are there iterative course corrections that we're going to have to make? SIIM is coming off of, not just SIIM, but all nonprofits are coming off of a couple of really difficult years, right? We recently, experienced the pandemic. There are ongoing healthcare disruptions. There have been changes in the industry, serious changes in the industry. So, we're going to stick to what's always worked for SIIM, which is a collective strategic planning, ongoing exercise that takes into account where we've been before. I think we're going to make sure that we're stewarding the organization as it deserves with like a lot of fiscal responsibility, making sure that the time of our volunteers, the time of our staff is appropriately managed and stewarded well so that we are using those resources, in the most efficient and the most impactful way. One thing that I'm really excited about is reinvigorating long-standing partnerships, like whether it's with the RSNA or HIMSS, but also, thinking about new partnerships and more recent partnerships, whether it's the DPA or other organizations, and thinking, about how we can bring more value to the most important stakeholders, those people who come to SIIM to learn, to volunteer, our vendor community, our researchers. I mean, really, it's about making sure that we're the place that they want to be and that we are them. So I think it'll be iterative. I'm not going to reveal anything that's, my big plans for July when we change everything, but I'm really excited about how we do these types of changes and handoffs. It's always been smooth, and we're not like some nations where they, as soon as the new regime comes in, they just, dismantle everything the old regime does. I'm really excited about building on the work of my esteemed predecessors.
And I will add to that, when I came 6.5 years ago, 2 words. My mandate was to grow SIIM. And I think the last couple of years, as Nabil pointed out, we did have to slow down because of external factors and our digital transformation. And now I'm feeling like we are strategically positioned to accelerate that growth, especially as we think of other imaging specialties. Maybe I'll mention DPA, Digital Pathology Association, with whom we've had a relationship that is continued and growing. And the broader digital pathology community, we are hearing interest in SIIM and wanting to learn from our members in making the digital transition, and especially from our institutional members where radiology and pathology are merging at the academic medical centers, them needing resources. And so how can we, SIIM, be that leader and provide the resources needed to help them, and at the same time, grow SIIM in our strategic outreach and just all the assets that we provide.
That is great. Thank you both. And I will point out, in case anybody here is listening and they're not familiar with the SIIM annual meeting looks like, because I actually just happened to be speaking with a colleague earlier today, and I said, hey, they're going to SIIM for the first time, and they're generally not fans of conferences. And I said, mark my words, this is going to be an entirely different experience. This is not your typical conference. And I will be on the record here saying that to everybody, that if you've not been to a SIIM meeting before, it is not your run-of-the-mill conference. It's entirely different. It's pretty special. So highly recommend it. So Cheryl, you talked about SIIM kind of transforming over the last few years, some things perhaps positive transformations like the new website, new platform, some things maybe not so positive with the pandemic and the difficulties. I'm actually curious, from a membership point of view and breakdown, how has that changed over the past few years? For example, do we see the shift in persona distribution as one example?
Yeah, so what comes to my mind in terms of members, we did peak in 2019 before the pandemic and are getting back to that pre-pandemic right now, just under 3,000 members. As far as the personas, I don't know we've seen those change as much. As where we've seen change is these other imaging specialties coming. For example, not only do we have a pathologist on the SIIM board now, we also have a dermatologist. And as we do these outreaches to other societies, as Nabil mentioned, other partnerships, especially with dermatologists and cardiologists, there's just unlimited opportunities for SIIM in that regard. So I think what we see is the 5 that we have, the main ones, but where we see growth is from these other specialties.
Absolutely. And I think Nabil touched on that as well, building bridges with these other specialties, these other associations. Yes. I definitely agree with both of you that I think SIIM has so much to offer as far as building these bridges and doing things together with these specialties. And that actually kind of leads me into the next question of, SIIM has been working hard on fortifying its educational resources, so to speak. So I'm actually curious, and I actually do want to hear from both of you on this one. In general, if you want to tell us more about what's going on the educational front, where this is going, and again, from a perspective of somebody who's perhaps not so familiar with SIIM, what does this look like for an outsider? Cheryl, maybe we start with you.
Yes, SIIM learning is definitely kind of our bedrock. And a couple years ago, thinking of that build, borrow, buy model, the board did choose to acquire a for-profit, the OTech training assets that we had kept on their website. But part of our digital transformation this past year was to bring those assets to our website and streamline that. And so here in post-deployment, that's still happening, but we're so excited to have those training assets that are both in person, online. There's also the e-study guides, Impacts, DICOM, HL7, and as well virtual hospital as part of the hands-on learning experience. Very excited for that opportunity to offer that. In addition, we have the monthly webinars on enterprise imaging, security, AI, tech tools, just unlimited topics there. And those are free to members. There is a small fee for non-members. We want to encourage everyone to join to take advantage of that opportunity. You mentioned the annual meeting, obviously our most visible networking opportunity. In addition, we have the NIC, I call it Imaging Informatics 101, that is online and live, that is geared toward residents, fourth-year residents, but open to anyone. And now offering both radiology and pathology content there, thanks to our sponsors, RSNA and Digital Pathology Association. And we have our annual AI conference that's in the fall, Conference on Machine Intelligence and Medical Imaging. That will be in Boston this year. Very excited for that. So yeah, unlimited possibilities, and we'll continue to grow those.
And I don't have much to add to Cheryl, except there's a qualitative portion which is really hard to explain to those who haven't experienced it themselves. And that is the access to the experts directly, who at SIIM I have always found to be so generous with their time and their expertise. To be able to go up to someone after they've given a talk, and that there's few people in the nation, or for that matter, the world, who know this topic better than them, and ask them, hey, I'm having trouble with this concept or this issue. What do you think? And I've always found them to not only be willing to answer right then, but then set up follow-up meetings and help and point out to resources, that could be helpful towards that. That is a part of the culture of learning, the generosity that experts have with each other that is hard to replicate. It's about culture. It's about people's, commitment to the field and to each other. And that's something that is underlying all of these programs, which I'm really grateful for myself.
Absolutely. I think you both bring up really good points. Maybe I'll just add one kind of from my perspective of the world. I will say this, that I think the SIIM Hackathon has been one of the most underrated educational resources. And I will say that from a collaboration with another association point of view, it's actually a nice opportunity. Low stakes, come in, attend the hackathon. For example, you'll hear somebody from the DPA saying, what the heck is this DICOM thing? Because it's new to their world. You can come in and very low stakes, very friendly networking type of environment, learn what it's like, do something cool, whip up a project, and show something for your idea and your work. And that's also another nice way that SIIM offers for people to come and learn, mingle, do something really cool together.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Mohammed. I also thought of additional one that's in development now. We are working at developing journey maps for wherever you are in your career journey, or if you're new to imaging informatics. We think this will be good too, not only for radiology, but for all imaging specialties and wanting to know and how to have a career in imaging informatics, given it's not something that's necessarily mentioned when you go to your guidance counselor in school. It's not necessarily a career that you're taught to pursue. So how do we provide that guidance for individuals who land on our website and want to know more about our field?
Absolutely. That actually sounds really cool. I wasn't aware of that coming, and I look forward to seeing that. I also wanted to touch on one more thing that you pointed out, Cheryl, about the webinars and the small fee for non-members. I'm very biased here, so that's my disclosure, but I think a SIIM membership is a no-brainer for anybody in the field to get, because it's not very expensive, actually inexpensive, extremely reasonable price, and the pricing structure makes it an obvious choice. If you're attending the conference, it pretty much is equal cost to get the membership and the entrance fee versus not. If you attend webinars, if you take SIIM training courses, you get discounts. It pays for itself very, very fast. So anybody thinking about it, if you're on the fence, go for it. You will not regret it.
And I'll add one more point, and that is that institutional memberships are a great way to have a whole team. And oftentimes, you know how it is. The imaging informatics community may be split up, and depending on their persona in different departments or different, campuses even, if they're imaging IT versus clinicians versus scientists or students or developers, they may not be in the same unit, because that would be quite an innovative structure. But a great way to get them together is through these institutional memberships. I know we've done that, and it's been a great way for us to be able to connect with each other.
And to piggyback on that, you were asking about membership. Mohammed, the trend we're seeing is that the institutional members are expanding their level of membership, given the fact that, there are more employees at their institution that benefit from SIIM. Recently, the Epic analysts were included in the membership. So to Nabil's point, that expansion of membership within our current institutional members is what we're seeing, and that's exciting.
I appreciate it. Thank you both. And speaking of the future, so Nabil, you've unveiled some plans. You're going to be called Chancellor. That's awesome. I love it. I am actually curious, because you also talked about the transition model, and part of the transition model that some of the listeners may not be aware of is that you're shadowing the previous chair, Tessa, for the past year, but then she essentially will be shadowing you for the first year during your session to help you with any questions. Can you give us a bit more insight about what that process looks like and the importance of having Tessa by your side during that first year?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's really important as a part of good governance and leadership for an organization to have a way to do a successful handoff and to provide continuity. It is guaranteed waste and guaranteed inefficiency if between new leaders, there's no good mechanism. And SIIM does this better than any other organization I know, because like you mentioned, for 1 year, you're on deck realizing, oh, I better pay attention. And who better in the world to pay attention to learn leadership skills from than Dr. Tessa Cook? Such huge shoes to fill, an incredible leader, expert knowledge, amazing leadership and people skills. You don't want to follow her except that you can learn from her so much. And luckily, she won't be off the hook, right? She'll be still available. And not only her, but people like Mark Coley or Jim Whitfield and others behind who were previous, who are still available, committed to the organization, present, actively engaged, innovating, and developing. So not just Tessa, but this whole cadre of leaders provides that continuity. Now, there are a couple of things that I really appreciate about the culture of SIIM, and that is it's okay to disagree. It's okay to say, we've done it this way in the past. It's not working. We're not going to do it this way anymore. Or it's okay to say, I strongly disagree with your opinion about this, but what we find is after that vigorous, debate, that vigorous go back and forth, that anti-groupthink mentality, when it comes to actually executing to create value for the vendors or the scientists or the clinicians or the researchers and students or the imaging IT folks, then everybody says, yes, this is the way we're going to go. We're going to all paddle together, all swim in the same direction to really get that desired result. So I feel like, Dr. Cook, myself, Dr. Coley, Dr. Whitfield, and others have been really working on that, purposefully, deliberately making sure we're going in a similar overall direction, which is to create value for the members of SIIM and to create value for those who benefit from SIIM, even if they're not members. Ultimately, that's going to be patients. Ultimately, it's going to be vendors. Ultimately, it's going to be others, in the scientific and research communities, whether they're part of SIIM or not, because SIIM is really about, creating that light, creating that value. And again, Tessa's support already this year has been amazing, and I'm looking forward to getting more of it next year.
Thank you, Nabil. You touched on a couple of points. I actually want to add my 2 cents. Firstly, I will point out that I've had the fortune of crashing a few board meetings for a reason I'm not going to get into right now. I will point out, honestly, for anybody listening, and if you're thinking about volunteering for SIIM, I highly recommend it. And hopefully one day, if you can run for, a board director or you become a committee chair and you're invited to the board meeting, it's a bucket list item for an imaging informaticist to be in that board. It is very nice to see how SIIM works. And it's like Nabil said, the governance model really works so well on multiple levels. As he mentioned, previous chairs who are officially off the hook are never really straying too far. They always stay close by. And I remember my impression the first time I got to go to the board meeting of seeing a number of previous chairs sitting in the room, again, under different capacities, but they're there and they're contributing. And it's exactly like Nabil said, there are disagreements, but I don't think I've ever seen such civilized debate in my entire life. And then, of course, once everybody's agreed, everybody's rowing in the same direction. So absolutely something to behold. And again, shout out for anybody, if you're thinking about volunteering for SIIM, highly recommend it. And you'll notice that the volunteers stay and stick around. And they may move from one committee to another, but people never get too far.
I just wanted to add that a lot of credit is due. I mean, it's always been the culture of SIIM, but Cheryl deserves a lot of credit for taking our processes and our methods and really amping them up, with like the best practices. She is a self-described governance geek, and she's not kidding. It's something that she really enjoys, but you can really see how, that benefits the organization. And, many folks, this may seem like a little bit esoteric, a little bit back office, but leadership like Cheryl's, leadership like Tessa's, really means that you can avoid getting distracted constantly by crises or personality differences. And it's really about the work, because we know how to make decisions and execute. And I'm incredibly grateful to Cheryl for making sure that we keep that North Star as well. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Nabil. Yes, and I have to say, coming to SIIM as that governance geek, I have learned so much from you all, the tech geeks. So it's been a wonderful partnership.
I echo Nabil's sentiment. I'm personally every day grateful for you, Cheryl, and everybody else at SIIM headquarters on multiple fronts. Governance, you all lead by kindness. That kindness is contagious. Again, I could sit here and enumerate a lot of things, but again, I'm very grateful for everything that you and your staff do every day to help us. And I've been on the record saying this before, and I'll say it again. People are always shocked when they realize how small SIIM headquarters actually is as far as a number of heads, and how mighty that team is as far as what they're able to do. And with that, I actually want to turn it to you, Cheryl, because I asked Nabil about kind of what he's looking forward to in the next year or two. And I know you touched on a number of things as well, but I'm curious if there was anything else that you wanted to highlight from a SIM point of view, anything coming up in the next year or two.
So 2024 is an important year as it marks 10 years of enterprise imaging, specifically 10 years of our collaboration with HIMSS, the Healthcare Information Management System Society. And in recognition of that, we have pulled together all the HIMSS SIM white papers published in the past 10 years and added a few more. I think there's 13 white papers now that we compiled into a collection. They're all open access and available in our journal, the Journal of Imaging Informatics and Medicine. The new name is JIM, online. And so I want to promote that as a body of knowledge that has, from day one, when enterprise imaging, the concept became a real thing. And now 10 years later, all these white papers are as useful, from what I'm hearing, to the point where we went back to the authors and had them write updates to their individual topics. For example, image sharing or standards-based imaging exchange, etc. So they've each written an update to their white paper, and that's been published in a reflections white paper. So just a wealth of knowledge. And I want to make sure everybody knows about that. Go to the JIM, the journal, and access those white papers. They're also on our website. So that's one thing we're looking forward to this year. We'll actually have a celebration during SIM 24 at the HIMSS SIM meetup. So come join us and celebrate 10 years of enterprise imaging.
If I could add a personal anecdote to what you just said, I've recently found myself digging up one of those old papers and referencing it. And I couldn't help but think in the back of my mind that, this thing is almost 10 years old, the paper that I'm looking at, but yet it's so useful to this day. And from when they wrote it at the time, there was so much foresight. It's pure gold. That's all I can say. There's a lot of great content in there. I want to thank you both for being so generous with your time. One more time, you're both very busy people. Thank you for making time for us, the podcast geeks. I do want to open it up for both of you one last time. If you have any closing thoughts or any calls to action, we'd love to hear from you.
I will just say, Mohanna, that I know I'll see you in DC at the SIM 24 meeting. I know I'll see Cheryl, but I hope I see everyone who is listening to this podcast as well. If you are there, please come up. Would love to get to know you, know your name, and know where you're from, and hear what you think about the conference.
And Mohanna, you summarized my talking points in terms of becoming a member, volunteering, and donating to the SIM Fund. Thank you for speaking on my behalf. Those are the 3 action items.
Thank you both so much.
SIMCAST has been brought to you by the Society of Imaging Informatics and Medicine. Please visit our website at SIIM.org for more information and educational content, including webinars and an archive of prior episodes. Please follow us on Twitter at @SIM_tweets. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support.